Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Green Room for DisrupTV. It's where we introduce our guests in reverse order. And of course, we recognize that this could be our 10th anniversary show. I don't know. Here with the amazing co-host, Vala Afshar, co-founder of DisrupTV. And of course, we've got our great guests. So let's start with our first guest. And more importantly, actually, we're going to in reverse order. So we'll start backwards. So Kyle, where are you coming in from? What are we talking about today?
I'm tuning in from Nashville, Tennessee, here to talk about what we can do to try to change our odds of success at important goals. Thanks for having me.
God, if I can only do that, we'd be much better off. John, what are we coming in from and what are we talking about? You see the whiteboard is ready to go.
Whiteboard's ready back home in the back cave of Massachusetts for a little while. We're going to talk about the paradox of AI leadership, why enterprise AI is kicking consumer AI's ass. That should be fun. And a little bit of enterprise event survival stuff for the spring for the AI Carnival. And I might even have a surprise for Ray and for Vala. So we shall see.
Oh, wow.
Looking forward to it.
All right, very cool. Well, with that, I'm going to attempt to start the show. Let me show you do the right one here. Let's see. That's an intro. All right, here we go. 3, 2.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on X at DisrupTV Show. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO, founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I see him on TV. It feels like on a daily basis, CNBC, Fox Business, Bloomberg. He's one of the top features to follow on X at RWANG0. Welcome, Mr. Wang, to DisrupTV and potentially our 10th year anniversary show, which I just realized.
Yeah, I think we could be our 10th year here. We're with Vala Afshar, as he mentioned. He's the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce. He's also the author of multiple books, including Boundless and Autonomous. I carry these with me whenever I'm home, actually. Just kidding. They're number one sellers on Amazon. And of course, A Great Path to the Future. And of course, he's working on his third book. The Triumvirate is about to come out. Executives around the world pay attention to every one of his inspirational, innovative tweets. And more importantly, when he's not keynoting, leading, or talking to executives at Salesforce, you can find him speaking on business TV outlets like Bloomberg, writing insightful analyses on ZDNet. And of course, he's one of the top keynoters in the world. So you should pay attention to his tweets. But it's not about us. It's about our inspirational guests, people who've done amazing things, CEOs, startup leaders, authors, and really leaders in the industry. So who do we have to kick it off today, Vala?
We're really fortunate because we do get brilliant authors to come on our show. And Kyle Austin Young is the author of a new book, came out very, very recently, I think November last year. Success is a numbers game. Achieve bigger goals by changing the odds. Kyle is an award-winning strategy consultant for high achievers, entrepreneurs, and leaders in a wide range of fields. This work has given Kyle the opportunity to develop and refine powerful systems for accomplishing big, meaningful goals that focuses on understanding and changing your odds of success. We need this book, Ray. You and I definitely need this book.
I know. I read that book 10 years ago.
Yeah. He's a popular writer for publications including Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, Boston Globe. I'm dialing in from Boston, so I'm happy to see that. CNBC, Forbes, and Business Insider. Welcome, Kyle. Congratulations on your new book, and thank you for joining us on DisrupTV.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
We're excited to have you, and more importantly, it's really about getting your insights. I started reading the book. I learned about Jill. I was like, darn. What made you write Success? as a numbers game, because at the end of the day, right, it always comes down to math, but then of course there's some art behind that. So share with us a little about that insight and what drove you to that. So please go ahead.
Sure. One of the things that really inspired this for me was actually just a season of disruption in my own life. I was laid off from a couple of different leadership positions around 13 months apart. And these were, significant, visible roles, big salaries, and neither was really an ideal time. I don't know if there is an ideal time to get laid off, but the first time my wife and I just bought our first home. The second time we were in the process of adopting our daughter, which is pretty famously expensive. And so we, this is about 15 years ago, but I made the decision that I wanted to try something different. I wanted to be more diversified. I didn't want to keep losing my income. So I was given some advice from different people to maybe consider consulting. And I was really fortunate in that the day after that second layoff, I had 4 job offers. And so I thought, great, I'll take fractional roles with each of these organizations, and that'll be kind of the beginning of my consulting career. So that went really well. But as there were really 2 things that happened as time went on. One was, as I started working with people in all of these different fields, it might be a doctor out of Harvard Medical School who wants to change the conversation around cancer. And then, at noon, it might be a call with a technology company trying to use virtual reality to help people learn new languages. And by the end of the day, it might be a nonprofit trying to dig wells in areas that don't have access to clean water. I had to find a common denominator. And just to keep myself sane, and in many ways, that common denominator became I wanted to do everything I could to help these people achieve their goals. What was the goal, and what could I do to ultimately help them accomplish that? So the odds of success became sort of a through line for me. But beyond that, getting laid off twice taught me that, I was kind of raised, show up, work with integrity, and, everything else will work itself out. Well, that mindset produced in my life just 2 back-to-back layoffs. In both cases, I was performing at a high level, getting good reviews, and it just didn't ultimately lead to career success. So what I learned from those experiences was that it wasn't enough for me to show up and do my job well. If the project was unsuccessful, if the company was unsuccessful, I was still going to be out of luck. I had to find a way to take ownership at a higher level, even if it was not what I was being hired to do, even if no one was asking me to do it. And so that really impressed upon me the importance of going into these positions, asking the question, what does success look like? And what can I do from my position, or even outside of, maybe the boundaries of what I was originally hired for, to try to help this project succeed? So that's what formed the early stages of my consulting career. Over a decade later, I'm here, and it's something I've been able to refine and formalize and share in bits and pieces in places like Harvard Business Review. This was a chance to do it in a book.
Wait, there's one note here that's really interesting, and it was like, chase goals where the odds are high, and that really stuck with me when I was reading it. So, but go ahead. Sorry.
No, not at all. Yeah, I think that there is certainly an opportunity to chase goals where the odds are high. I try to help people get a sense of what their odds of success are, and I tell them there's 4 paths to success, and the first one is exactly what you said. A lot of times when you're dealing with somebody who's really smart, really creative, really ambitious, they have more ideas than they have time, and we're constantly trying to give people different filters for prioritization. And so sometimes we tell people to choose the opportunity that most aligns with your values. And other times we tell people, choose the opportunity that will make subsequent opportunities easier to accomplish. And I think both of those are great lenses to look through. But if we're not stopping to at least consider our odds of success, then I think we're leaving a lot on the table, because it doesn't really matter how much, alignment there is with your values. If you're pursuing goals that are almost guaranteed to fail, I'm not sure that's the most productive use of your time.
Agree.
So what do people get wrong? In your case, maybe your risk reward analysis was focused on you, show up, do the job, do it on budget, on time, exceed expectations. But what was outside your control was the performance of the overall company or organization. Is that what people get wrong? They don't have a horizontal view. It's mostly contextual understanding of who they are and the type of work they do, rather than having a broader view in terms of the overall contribution of the organism or institution that they're a part of.
I do think there is a problem that we a lot of times have projects where people are taking responsibility for a really narrow aspect of the project as a whole. There's not a lot of integration, and that can certainly be an issue. In the book, I teach people how to create something called a success diagram, where you visually lay out, here's everything that's going to have to go right in order for us to get what we want. You also list out the potential bad outcomes. Here are the things that could derail us from getting what we want. And I find that to be a really useful collaboration tool to kind of fight against exactly what you just described, where people get so siloed that they're maybe unable to work, in a more integrated fashion. But the other mistake that people make a lot is we fall into this thinking trap called averaging. And so sometimes I explain that in the context of an example saying, let's say that you're training to run a marathon. That's a goal that you've set for yourself. So you hire a running coach and she says, there's 3 things I need you to do in order to get you ready for this race. I'm going to need you to eat, sleep, and train according to some regimens that I'm going to design for you. So in this scenario, there's 3 things that have to go right. And what I do to try to illustrate this for people is say, let's take some really easy made up numbers and say that we sat down and checked in with ourselves and said, I think there's a 70% chance I'll eat the way I'm supposed to, a 70% chance I'll sleep the way I'm supposed to, and a 70% chance I'll train the way I'm supposed to. So yeah, let's do it. I feel great about this goal. Well, the trap they've fallen into is this trap of averaging. They feel good about each of the individual prerequisite steps, so they feel good about the outcome as a whole. In reality, we can't average, we have to multiply. And if we multiply 0.7 times 0.7 times 0.7, we find there's only a 34% chance they're going to be ready on race day. We don't know where they're going to drop the ball, but we expect them to fail at this goal. So we have lots and lots of people who are frustrated with their lives. They're saying the game is rigged. Why can nobody accomplish their New Year's resolutions? Why do 9 out of 10 businesses fail? Why do so many mergers and acquisitions fail to ultimately produce, lasting shareholder value? Well, think about how many things have to go right there. I mean, in my marathon example, there's 3, and there's a 70% chance that each of them happens. What if there's a goal where 15 things need to go right? We would have to have incredible odds of success at each of those individual steps. So I don't say that to discourage people, but I use that as an example to help people understand how essential it is that we pay attention to our odds, and ultimately that we do what I call probability hacking, which is changing our odds to put ourselves in a stronger position.
That's a great point, right? And our guests watching this show are probably too impatient to figure out exactly how to get through all the probabilities. And so I think one of the things you talk about is the probability hack, right? But let's get to PBOs first and then talk probability hack, because I think it's important for them to have that foundation. So
sure. Well, PBOs are the foundation of probability hacking. So we can do both of those at once. What I encourage people to understand is that we can conceptualize probabilities similar to how we've typically conceptualized matter. The idea that it can't be created or destroyed, but it can be transferred and rearranged. The odds of success that you want can't be conjured into existence, but they're currently hiding in your potential bad outcomes, your PBOs, as I call them. And if we make those bad outcomes less likely to happen, we can systematically de-risk your goal, bring those odds over to our side. So in the example of running a marathon, we need to train a certain way for 90 days. What a lot of people would tell you to do is they'd say, well, you need to think positive, right? Don't focus on what could go wrong. If it's meant to happen, it'll happen. We encourage people to think positive. I typically do the opposite. I encourage people to think negative. I encourage them to try to identify what are the potential bad outcomes that could happen instead of what you want. Instead of you sticking to the training regimen, maybe you get derailed because of some bad weather. I just dealt with that recently. There was ice on the sidewalks for about 2 weeks. I had to have another plan. Maybe you get derailed because of scheduling conflicts. Maybe you get derailed because, oh goodness, maybe you lose some motivation as the time goes on. So if these are our potential bad outcomes, probability hacking is just doing the creative work of finding solutions to those. If I'm concerned about inclement weather, I might need a gym membership for a period of time. If I'm concerned about my schedule, I might need to try to run first thing in the morning before clients could, potentially have an impact on how I'm able to spend my time. If I'm concerned about a lack of motivation, I might need to find a running partner. But if we take the time to diagram this out in advance, make these bad outcomes less likely to happen, we've now made it significantly more likely that we will stick with that training regimen. And if we do that step by step, we can optimize our goals and put ourselves in a position to win more often.
Did you apply this type of thinking in terms of writing your book? I know writing a book is, for me, it's
asking for a friend. It's
like a root canal experience for me. And maybe because even though I'm a double E and spent 6 years studying electrical engineering, probability was probably the hardest course I took in college, the one I struggled with most. Super not intuitive like I was hoping for. So I've had trouble with probability hacking, I think, my whole life. But can you share with us, what were some of the negative scenario planning that you did in order to anticipate the Herculean effort it takes to write a good book?
Sure. I have this memory, and I don't know how accurate it is, but the memory for me is that my mother was driving me from a funeral to a graveside for a family member when I was pretty young, like 11, 14, long time ago. And as I remember it, on that drive, she asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I remember telling her I wanted to be a writer. That was a goal that I had as a child.
Wow.
Awesome.
But that is
because
not
because you were a ferocious reader. Like, what is it? What was it?
I
about
have
writing?
always been a ferocious reader.
Okay.
I've always enjoyed teaching, and so it just felt like an
Oh,
opportunity to,
awesome.
create frameworks for important ideas and try to help people with it. But that was a long time ago. So I had this goal, though. I wanted to write a book. And so one of the ways that I probability hacked that goal was I was able to essentially create a mental success diagram, not really as an 11-year-old, but what was I going to need? I was going to need, a platform. I was going to be able to demonstrate that I had access to an audience. I was going to need some expertise. I was going to need credentials. I was going to need relationships with people in the publishing industry. And so in many ways, my consulting career was an opportunity to go develop those things. And so it felt almost passive to some extent because it was just maybe I was considering two different clients. Well, in the context of my goal, I could ask what are the potential bad outcomes that might be addressed by working with client A versus working with client B. And so by the time, I was several years in, I'd written for the Harvard Business Review and I had relationships. I chose to take on some literary agents as clients, even though it might not have paid as well as I normally would have been expecting. But then I had connections in the industry and I had, again, the opportunity to work with people that had incredible stories, incredible credentials that further boosted my own career. And so by the time I decided I was going to pursue a book deal, it really wasn't that challenging. It's a very challenging goal if you don't have these advantages in place, but when you know what you're going to need, you can start collecting them, like I said, almost passively. So I got a book deal pretty quickly. I had a really significant advance. I'm very thankful for that, but it was to some extent made possible just by the work that I did to hack those odds.
Do you think if you didn't have those two career obstacles, the book would have happened?
The layoffs?
Yeah.
Not this book. I think a different book might have happened eventually. It might have been a book about how to not get laid off if I'd never been laid off. But no, but I do think there is something to be said. I mean, the first article I ever wrote in Fast Company was about how you bounce back when you get laid off twice in 1 year. So there's certainly an opportunity to share what you know, even when it comes out of, some hard-won wisdoms. But no, this book, like I said, I think really came from a consulting model that forced me to find a common denominator when I was working with lots of different people, and also helped me recognize the opportunity that I had to take a higher level of responsibility for my client's success, recognizing that my individual performance wasn't necessarily going to keep the checks coming.
Are you a quant? Are you a numbers guy?
No, I wouldn't describe myself as that at all. No, I think that this was how I thought almost from a story-driven standpoint. And as time went on, I started to understand better the mathematical basis for it, and turned out that there was a reason why it worked.
That's awesome.
So I want to jump in and ask you about
the
success, the way you're basically how you're building your success maps and really mapping out how you actually do that. It's critical to your book, right? The success diagram, right? And you're actually putting the PBOs there, identifying the critical points. How did you come to that, right? To get it down to that point, because that's the essence of like getting started, right?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it just started with, people create a to-do list, or we'll say like do a brain dump to get things out of your head from a productivity standpoint. Well, I think the same is true from a probability standpoint. So it was just kind of creating a map of here's what it's going to take to get from here to there. What's the goal? What are the steps required? And then recognizing that for each of the things that had to go right, there were things that could go wrong. And typically that was my most straightforward way to change my odds of success, was to ultimately try to de-risk those bad outcomes. So a story I tell is when I was getting that first job out of college, I was later laid off from it, but I wanted to, if I could, skip some of the entry-level positions I was seeing. So I applied to become the product development director at a health organization. And I was 21 years old. I was going to be managing people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. We're talking nutritionists, licensed professional counselors, people with all of these advanced degrees. I'm 21, and I thought, you know what, let's give it a shot. So I got an interview, and I wanted to make the most of it. And I went into that interview, and at that point, there was only one more thing that needed to go right. I just needed an offer. That was the last step. I'd already gotten the interview. Now it was just offer me the job. So I, even at that stage, 21, long time ago, asked the question, what are the potential bad outcomes that could keep me from getting what I wanted? And these are the alternative outcomes to success. And so one of the ones I identified was they might not hire me because of how young I looked. I might walk in, they'd take one look at me and go, oh gosh, there's no way he could do this. So very intentionally, but also very simply, I grew a beard. And it was just an opportunity to look a little bit older than I was and take some of that risk out of that.
Bad weight in my hair, man. I've been getting my ass kicked since I was like 22. So
yeah,
like,
maybe you need to. This might have been a hack for you too.
I can't grow the beard. It's not gonna happen.
You can't grow the beard. Yeah,
little genetic issue.
A fake beard. I don't know. Yeah, that was something that was at my disposal. We all have different opportunities, so I took advantage of it, and it was helpful to me then. A second potential bad outcome that I recognized was they might not hire me because of my lack of experience, which would make total sense. I had nothing on my resume. I just graduated from college. I wasn't going to lie about my experience. I couldn't conjure up experience overnight, but what I did was I actually typed out a plan for how I was going to turn this ineffective department around. And it was ended up being so thick, I had to have it spiral bound. It was a book. And every time I was in an interview and one of them would ask me a question about my, my work history, I would just redirect the conversation to be about my vision for the department. Say, well, as you can see in this proposal that I put together. And so that was a way I took a lot of risk out of that potential bad outcome. The third and final one I identified was they might be concerned that I just couldn't fit in with the existing team because I was so young. So what I did there, again, this is just the creative work of probability hacking. I asked if the team had read any books as a group lately, and they gave me a few titles. I went out and read all of them, and it put me in a position where when I was interviewing and interacting with the team, I knew their jargon, I knew their goals, I knew the frameworks that they were using. I could talk to them like they were, close friends of mine. And I remember being in a group interview. It was me and some of the other candidates, and these were people who were much older than I was then, many of them much older than I still am now. And one of the books they'd read was called The Wuffy Factor. Not a lot of people are currently talking about The Wuffy Factor, but it was a book about how brands generate social capital. And I remember somebody throwing out an idea, and I said, yeah, I think that's the kind of idea that could help us get a lot of Wuffy. And I remember looking around at these other candidates, and their eyes are bugging out of their heads. What on earth did this kid just say? What is Wuffy? What is he talking about? But then I looked at the existing team members, and they were all smiling and nodding along. They knew exactly what I was saying. This was the book they had just read. So ultimately, that was, an example of how I created a success diagram. There was one thing that had to go right. I could perceive 3 potential bad outcomes. I did what I could to take the risk out, and I got that job. I became the 21-year-old department manager at a health organization, managing people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. There were some layoffs that happened a few years later. I was included in those, but that dramatically accelerated my career. It's what allowed me to get a second leadership position, and ultimately the connections that came from those 2 jobs are what allowed me to start consulting pretty seamlessly.
That's
Tara
awesome.
Hunt must love you. Tara Hunt must be your friend.
That's just listening to the fact that you're exercising your anticipatory muscles. You're anticipating the people that you're going to be engaging with, their thinking, their beliefs, their accomplishments, their achievements, and you're not looking for shortcuts. You're just anticipating potential outcomes, some that may be negative, and you're trying to reduce the probability of those set events impacting your success. I think it's awesome. Role of social media in terms of changing your odds. How did social media impact your personal brand and your ability? Yeah, we could use some help here, you and I, Ray, with some social media guidance.
Sure. So, you could certainly set a goal of I want to grow a social media following. There could be a success diagram for that. There could be potential bad outcomes for that. Sometimes social media is a hack. It's part of what we do to change our odds of success. If we know that one of the things that's going to have to go right for our new business to succeed is we're going to have to get a certain amount of web traffic. And, the potential bad outcome is we don't get enough web traffic. Well, how can we hack that? Maybe we need a social media presence. So one of the nice things about a success diagram is it keeps you pretty laser focused on the things that are actually going to impact your odds of success. We don't have a to-do list of things that might or might not matter. Everything is tied to that outcome of here's what has to go right in order for me to get what I want. Here are the things that could go wrong. What can I do about that? So in that sense, social media can be really valuable. But I'll tell you a story again that kind of speaks to focus. I recently was working with a nonprofit organization that tries to serve people dealing with homelessness, addiction, even victims of human trafficking. They're doing really remarkable work in a part of the country that has a lot of need. And about half of their money comes from thrift stores that they own, which is cool that they're able to subsidize so much of their own work. But the other half comes from donations, and much of that is generated by their newsletter. And this was a company that had seen decades of growth and was now experiencing decline, and they weren't sure why donations were coming in at a different level. Their best guess was that their content strategy had just gotten stale. People were tired of hearing the same stories of transformation over and over. So they brought in a bunch of different people to try to fix that unsuccessfully. Finally, they bring me in. And this is, again, an example of I had a job description, which was reinvent the content strategy, but I now have a mindset, which is how do I make this project successful? So I created a success diagram. It would have been very easy to say, social media, we need to, if we're not getting the traffic from the newsletter, we're going to go to social media. And that certainly could have been an opportunity. At that time, I created a success diagram of what does it take for somebody to go from newsletter reader to residual donor, somebody who's, on a recurring basis donating to this ministry. And the first critical point in that diagram was we got to make sure they're getting the emails. And so I looked into it, and it turned out there was a technical glitch that was causing one major inbox to send all of the emails to spam. And I was able to go back and find when that glitch was implemented, when that happened. And so they'd been bringing people in to reinvent their content strategy. It turned out their content was fine. Nobody was actually seeing the content that they were producing. So we fixed the technical glitch. All of a sudden, people start receiving the newsletter again, and we were able to heal a lot of what had been broken. So, I'm happy to share specific social strategies, but for me, it's always in the context of a goal. What do we need to accomplish? And if we know that and we know what it's going to take, then it's one of the ways that I encourage people to avoid what sometimes feels like an endless to-do list. If I need to be on every single social platform, I need to be doing all of these things. Why? Like show me in a diagram why you need to be doing these things. And if you do, great, I'll help you do it. But if you don't, I don't want to worry about it.
Yeah,
that is amazing. That is amazing. And as you were just speaking, the Dow just crossed 50,000 for the first time. So it must have been the success map that was set up, the success diagram. Someone out there is figuring out how to make money off the
Build
bad
some
trades
success
yesterday.
maps for crypto community. We need some help here.
Crypto's back. Crypto's back as well. I'm looking at the Bloomberg. It says so.
Back.
We are
It's
here
not-
with
it's
Kyle
not back.
Austin Young, author of Success is a Numbers Game. Achieve bigger goals by changing the odds. So, hey, thanks for being on the show. We'll definitely try to catch up with you in Nashville. And if you're out here in the Bay Area or Boston, let us know. Definitely part of the new Disrupt TV
On a new
community.
book.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Hey,
Cheers.
happy Friday.
You too.
Ray, at Salesforce, we have our V2 MOM process, the vision, values, methods, obstacles, and measurements. So there is a section called obstacles where we're proactively trying to identify things that might limit us from achieving our success with a 12-month forward-looking lens. So I like the fact that the success maps doesn't just look at steps you need to take to climb, but what potential steps could be slippery and what you need to do to mitigate that risk. So that's important. Okay, I'm waiting for our next guest to pop on the platform, and there he is, Jon Reed. Jon Reed has been building enterprise communities since 1995 when I was in grad school. Just trying to make our guests feel old. He's not. We're the same age. Jon advises vendors, startups on reaching today's informed enterprise buyer. He is the co-founder of Diginomica and author of 5 books. So again, if you haven't written a book, it's unlikely you're going to be on Disrupt. Jon has earned a reputation with some outspoken views and research on pros and cons of agentic AI in the enterprise. Jon's signature weekly column, a must read. It's called Enterprise Hits and Misses, which we're going to talk about on this show, I'm sure. And, even though you could be the most successful, most winningest football coach or football owner and still not make it to the Hall of Fame, Jon Reed is a guaranteed first ballot Hall of Fame DisrupTV inductee. So
That would never happen in football. I don't know what you're talking about.
Guaranteed. There's no chance that he wouldn't be a first ballot inductee.
But here at Disrupt TV, we know it wouldn't happen. So.
Welcome back, Jon.
Hi, guys.
To Disrupt.
I heard a rumor.
I need a score prediction for
the Super Bowl.
We got to put you like this for this show. We're going to pop you like this. So
wow.
There we go. There we go.
Dude, I think it's going to be a tight game. I don't think these one team is massively superior to the other, despite what some of the gamblers think. I'm expecting a field goal or so margin. I think it's going to be a good one. I don't know. I mean, you know me, I'm rooting for the Pats, so it's hard for me to make a prediction. I mean, you have to favor Seattle, but you play one game, anything can happen, man. So, all right, I'll go 24-21 Pats, but don't go and bet on those odds, please.
That's an excellent, 3 touchdowns and a field goal for Pats makes, they, of course, May will have to play stronger, and hopefully the shoulder.
Of course,
is okay. And the defense needs to show up, man. This is a amazing Seattle team. Great prediction. And most of the Patriots Super Bowls have been 3 points.
Yeah, always give you a good game. Pats are good. You might hate the team, but their Pats are good for ratings because it's always close. But
yeah, that's true.
So I hear a rumor that this might be the 10th anniversary show. Not a lot of pomp and circumstance here, but
we are. It's funny you say that. We're 7 guests away from 1,500 interviews. So 1,500 interviews, and average interviews is like a half hour. So imagine we've got many hours of interviews. And yeah, I think it's this week. Once you spend your favorite time of the week with the favorite person you want to be for 10 years, you just kind of lose track of how long you've been doing it. But I think it is this week.
Hold on. Episode 1 was the
Whitney Johnson
-9. I know that. So I think, yeah.
I can't believe Jon wasn't on episode 1.
So
what a big miss.
So anyway, just on that note, I think
days from now. This is
obviously
February
obviously congrats, but
Thank you.
I think the thing I would emphasize, you could talk about all these hundreds of shows and stuff, and I think what that fails to capture is the impact of a particular show. So for example, the last time I was on, I made a pretty impassioned case for finding human purpose amidst machines. Ray, you threw down the gauntlet and challenged me to turn that into kind of a manifesto, which I sort of tried to do, and that became a panel at Constellation Connected Enterprise with several smart people.
Yeah.
That meant a lot to me because you basically put some faith in me to go up there and do something with that content. I think it resonated some, and just so you know, the ripples of this, I don't want to reveal the name because I didn't get permission, but someone who was in the audience was struck by that conversation and has written an entire book now on AI ethics that they're submitting to publishers as a result of that. And so the reason I'm pointing that out is because when you talk about all these shows, I think what you miss is that you capture something here, and it matters. And I think amidst all the market noise that we're having right now, particularly around AI, but other stuff as well, I don't think there's enough forums for actually really understanding what's happening. And I don't know about you, but I'm incredibly dissatisfied with my social feeds as far as really understanding what's really going on at any point in time. And I don't mind them if I have the context, but if I'm not bringing the context to the feed's not going to give me what I need. The feed is just going to fuel my fears and insecurities about the world and what the hell do I do? What the hell should my company do? And so anyway, I think you guys should feel really good about providing a format just like the last guest, where we really got to understand not just his philosophy, but what drove him to arrive at that. That's just fantastic. So feel good about that. Each show counts is what I would say.
Listen, if it could influence you in writing your 6th book,
Yeah.
Ray and I will be smiling ear to ear.
There you go.
Thank you for the kind words. Really appreciate you. That's why you're a first ballot Hall of Fame. You bring some, you share your wisdom and give us context and meaning in terms of what we do. And I have to tell you again, I don't want to take time away from more. Spending Friday afternoons, most of our colleagues are decompressing at this time, and this is where like we're on. Like I only get into like a flow state on this show, unless I'm on stage or doing something super meaningful. So it's great to get validation from someone like yourself. So I appreciate it. Okay, Ray, you always start off with the first question. Let's go.
Actually, I was thinking, right, do I really want to ask this question on the paradox of AI leadership and really what frontier companies or what new AI leaders are looking at? And then I realized, like, in the sense of the conversation, right, like the last week has been just crazy, right? I mean, we've got Maltbulb, OpenClaw, like Anthropic, all challenging. I mean, we talk about disruption all the time. Right. And so is an AI leader really a disruptive leader? Or is an AI leader really about this exponential capability? So let's talk about AI leadership in the context of, like, could we really have 100-person company take out a large software company, 100,000-person company take out a large services firm, like a single-person company do $1 billion in ARR? Like, is that AI leadership, or is AI leadership the policy and the framework and the rails that are required for us to actually put all this together? Or is AI leadership really companies that are thinking about how to make this all come together? Like, what says you?
Right. Well, I'm not going to tell you that I'm not one of those, oh, here's your bullet point, here's what a leader is. That's not my style. But I think the right AI leadership is the right leadership for your company. But what I would argue is that most people aren't prepared to lead in this era. And the thing that I think people need most to understand most of all is what your direction is and how is that going to affect them? Like, what so many companies I feel like are kind of stoking people's fears for their employment, and they're kind of enjoying the hamster wheel effect of trying to 10x your productivity while employers analyze your digital exhaust to try to assess how well you're doing your job. If that may be one way to compete, I'm really hoping that there's others. And I think it's really, really important to communicate clearly where you're trying to take people. Now, I think it is going to involve some acknowledge of uncertainty, right? Because just like we saw the last week, I happen to think a lot of what happened this week is mostly hype and BS rather than genuine advancements.
Yeah, agreed.
But at the same time, it's you be a fool to not acknowledge the pace of it. and what's happening, and that you're going to try to help employees understand how to get the skills they need to make the contributions that will make them effective. And if you're uncertain about headcount stuff, you may have to acknowledge that. But the point is, there's really a lack of transparency around it that I'm really struggling with right now as far as where leadership is going. One thing I really want to point out to you about disruption is that one dynamic I've noticed with AI a lot, and this is true with disruption in general, is when you disrupt something, it doesn't mean that you have a solution to what's being disrupted. Okay. So for example, think about e-commerce. Amazon not only disrupted how commerce was being done, but it provided a solution and a different way of doing commerce. Craigslist, on the other hand, completely undermined the model of local media and business models through advertising they could no longer get. And mostly local media has never recovered from that. And there was no viable commercial alternative that was ever presented to that. And we could talk more about that if you want. But the point is, when you disrupt something, it doesn't mean you can replace it. And what I would say about AI and SaaS is that's absolutely the case. If you look at the characteristics of LLMs in particular, they're probabilistic engines. They do a lot of pretty amazing things, even if they were trained unethically. That's a different conversation. But they do amazing things. They don't necessarily replace good SaaS. On the other hand, as Larry Dignan just wrote on your blog in a must-read blog, the SaaS industry was getting stale and overpriced. And you've been talking about this for years as well. And when you look at the disruption of the big research firms, Ray, you and I were talking about the problems with those business models 10 years ago. These models were vulnerable to being disrupted because they weren't delivering on value in the first place. And so if you're not delivering on value, then you got to be scared right now. And I think that's one of the real keys. And for example, I just got back from a big cloud ERP show with Acumatica. Now they are a client, so take that with a grain of salt, but they're the only enterprise software player besides Zoho, which is kind of doing this even more down market, that has a consumption-based pricing model for their software. And they have a modern platform for ERP that's flexible and delivers value for customers. A lot of those customers aren't even using a lot of generative AI yet. They're using a lot of predictive modeling and other kinds of automation for sure. The stories are great. They've had their best year ever. And the point is, they were already pushing for a different value proposition. They were doing that. They were pushing themselves. So I think what's getting exposed more than anything is a lot of industries that were getting stale and rigid and not fluid enough for the market that we have now. And AI is poking holes in that, but isn't necessarily offering solutions. And that's kind of the whole thing I wanted to talk to you about, consumer grade versus enterprise grade, because it's one thing to attempt to automate calendar things at home to remind you, or to message your wife twice a day with your Claude bot and tell you, whatever. And if that screws up, that's fine. Doing that at enterprise scale is a whole different can of worms. And so we have to be a little bit careful about our excitement, even though there's something really fascinating about, for example, creating it like I think you have to say that Moltbook is a fascinating experiment of putting a bunch of agents on a social network together. Now, we found out through reporting like 404 Media that there's a lot of humans participating in that network in the guise of agents. So it's not truly agents talking to each other, which is just one more example of how people get really freaking confused. But the point is, there's a lot of cool, interesting stuff. You just have to step back a little bit and keep playing that long game of executing for your customers.
That's key. Executing.
AI, let's go back to AI leadership. What are some? So we talked about value. We talked about being value driven, focusing on your stakeholder success, your customer, your employees. Knowing speed is an important currency. So if you can deliver value quickly without compromising ethics or privacy, then you stay relevant. So I think speed is pretty important. And if you're able to do something, scaling that goodness, so speed and scale are important. But what are some of the traits that leaders need to develop in a world put more and more powered by AI as compared to 5 years ago or 10 years ago? Are there certain things you look for when you're in a room trying to understand how this leader is using technology to grow his or her organization or business? Are there certain muscles, certain traits? Do they have to be more self-aware, more humble, have a beginner's mindset? Like, what are some of the things they need to have?
Well, I talked about transparency of communication already. So I think like there's a whole thing around the courage of building an organization that's open, where you can openly talk about the disruption. So I've talked
how do
about
you
that.
see that? Is it when a leader says we've effed up, like when they share their mistakes as much as their successes? What do you look for when you say transparency?
Okay, well, so let me just see if I can like add the other ingredients, and we can come back to it and see how it all fits. So another thing is that I think AI to some extent has provoked this whole conversation on we're focused on outcomes, right? And outcomes and results has been like a big thing you hear all the time now. And so that is part of it, which is kind of like being more business driven than ever before, right? So, not just doing tech for its own sake, but really understanding what kind of results are we going to derive from this technology. Study after study shows, for example, that most enterprises don't get results out of their AI projects. PwC just did a survey of more than 4,000 CEOs that said that 90%, that's a significant number. That's not a small sample size. More than 90% weren't getting value. The 10% that are, I'd like to come back to because it's a really important aspect of this story. But anyway, the point being, outcomes are important, but what happens next is where people get into trouble. So for example, then you would lean mistakenly towards this AI first mantra of imposing tools on your people. And in fact, imposing tools on your people is not outcome thinking, right? Because outcome thinking is however we get the outcome, whatever that outcome is, better serving our customers better, building better products. That's not about technology, right? That's about getting a result. And so at that point, you've contradicted yourself. And so if you're really focused on outcomes, then you got to call yourself to that outcome and quit obsessing about, oh, this Jon Reed took an hour off from his, Slack channel. What was he doing? Like now you're no longer on outcome thinking. Now you're drilling down into data exhaust to monitor my every move on the job. That's not outcome thinking. So when you talk about outcome thinking, you're actually challenging yourself to change how you relate to your employees and to not force AI down their throats. Do you know what? Who at this point in time as an employee would not use a tool that helped them do their jobs better? Almost no one. So if they don't like your AI tools, it means your AI tools suck. I just got this AI stuff embedded in my QuickBooks that I use to manage my older business. Man, that AI is terrible, man. It's like, oh, we changed the tone of your email for you. What like where's my insight on who my 10 most profitable customers are? Where's that? We just rewrote your email for you. Like, look, if your employees don't like your AI, your AI is not very good. Okay, so what's the alternative? The alternative is, okay, look, I'm not saying that let me just crystallize this. Someone told me when I went on this rant at the show last week, they were like, yes, AI is just a tool. And I said, hold on a sec. You're right, but it's different because with AI, someone in your organization is going to come to you and say, what are you doing about AI? So if you don't have an answer to that question because you don't want to use that tool, then the answer is going to be imposed upon you. So there is a big old asterisk next to AI. You have to have an answer to that. And as a leader, what I want to see is, are you creating a culture of experimentation and innovation instead of imposing AI use mandates on your people? In other words, are you creating safe sandboxes for them to play with these tools, to play around with real data in a safe environment? Not the kind of open claw stuff that got exposed this week for like basically, giving someone complete access to all of your, authorizations, but a secure environment where you can actually experiment and come to your team and say, hey, look what I built. I don't know about you all, but I've had this happen to me at Diginomica all the time. People are coming in like, oh, look, we built this new dashboard. We built this new report. No one's telling anyone to do anything, but they're experimenting with cool tools. I did a big workshop using LLMs to build business cases this fall. It was so cool to watch everyone interacting around business case development. And it was really cool. But the point is, like, experimentation is the key, not imposing mandates. So if you're really going to be outcomes driven, you have to then step back from that buzzword and say, hey, that actually means that I can't judge you based on how you got there. If you got a result, I need to understand how you got that good result and not force everyone to do the same.
So you mentioned transparency, outcome-based, safe space to experiment, things that give you evidence that this is a leader that's thinking properly in terms of advancing his or her organization. As a co-founder of a company, media company, what level of AI competence and literacy do you look for before you hire someone into Diginomica? Like, what do you look for today that you didn't look for 2 years ago?
You know, I kind of look in some ways for the same thing, and Ray, I don't know if you relate to this at all, but I think if anything, Vala, I look less and less for credentials and training, and I've done this in the enterprise, or I've done that. I'm looking for passion and curiosity and raw drive. That's what I'm looking for, and because
Add that to the list of transparency and passion, grit, resilience.
Because it's all about try new stuff, and don't be afraid to challenge me. Like, that's another big one.
You're an intimidating guy when you first meet Jon Reed.
Yeah,
you're a.
What about curiosity? What about curiosity? So
absolutely, and it was really interesting because I can't remember if I shared this on the show before, but MIT had a really interesting video on AI leadership, and they were really struck by they thought they would hear a lot about data literacy and technical skills, and said instead we got playfulness, courage, like some of the stuff you're alluding to, Ray, made us realize the human side of AI transformation might be more complex than the technical side. But I responded with another point, and I want to add this to the mix. I said playfulness and courage are important, but if you don't have the technical and data literacy chops, you're going to make huge mistakes. Without deep knowledge of this technology, you can't accurately rethink how it will impact work. And so that's the paradox of AI leadership, is you also have to get more technical than you ever have before. Otherwise, you don't know what to tune out and what constitutes a genuine breakthrough and what doesn't. I'm on my way to my 3rd AI certification. I want everyone in my organization to be learning as much as they can, not just playing with the tools, but getting under the hood. And I had a really great argument with an HR leader about this last year, because he said to me, in front of a bunch of people, he said, I don't worry about what's in my iPhone. It does what it does. And I feel the same way about AI. And I pulled him aside and I said, hold on a sec. So you're saying that if you implement things like performance reviews in your HR department that are AI written or authored, if you're evaluating succession and performance based on people's work performance, and you can't explain to me how that system works, like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And he was like, you're right. I need to be able to explain what we implemented here and why and how it works. And so, and people don't like it because they're not used to getting that technical, but you better.
So let me make sure I understand this distinction. Don't impose use of technology, but do impose understanding of how the technology works.
Exactly. And that gets back to my whole enterprise versus consumer AI thing. And you guys can decide how far you want to dig into this rabbit hole. But historically, as we know, consumer tech has always beat enterprise AI to the punch and made enterprises look slow and sluggish.
Starting with this guy in 2007.
Mobile phone. Yeah. And we can look at the internet and then smartphones as two shining examples of where enterprises were caught, and enterprise software vendors like really looking like stale and legacy. Well, AI is a little bit different because obviously the frontier model companies are doing a lot of impressive things, some of which I'm concerned about, some of which are really amazing. But the thing is, a lot of stuff breaks, and they're breaking a lot of stuff in real time. I mean, one of the big examples was Google Health recently had to pull down a bunch of stuff from its AI inline search on health because it was putting users at risk with inaccurate and false information over blood tests. It even made up a body part that didn't exist in humans.
That's pretty good, man. I thought it was pretty awesome.
And
yeah, no, I'm kidding.
Now, look, I'm not saying that health AI could never be useful, but it's an incredible example of where an individual better have some literacy and a little bit of critical thinking and lack of trust if they're gonna go down that route. And so for example, in an enterprise context, Vala, the way we're getting a better result out of the current generation of systems, which are largely LLM driven, is through much more contextual architectures that essentially provide the LLM with all kinds of data and tools that help it to do a better job for very specific scenarios. So in the case of like the business case workshop, for example, we fed the LLM information through context. It's called context engineering.
Yeah.
Esteban hates that word, by the way. But anyway,
it's a very important word. You better start loving it.
It allows
executives are asking about it all the time.
It allows you to source all kinds of information. Now, it's not perfect. The LLM doesn't always interpret the information correctly, and it's not always provided correctly, but it really, really improves the reliability and relevance. And you can also feed your own data in there, by the way, without quote unquote training the LM. So that's another huge advantage. Plus it gives you some level of explainability because it shows you where the source documents came from. So you can double check those if you want to.
Right.
But the point is creating these kinds of architectures and also handling things like model drift when models change, when prompts need to be updated, all of this, it's rather sophisticated stuff. And a leader needs to at least understand what's going on there. They don't necessarily need to know how to build it themselves, but they do need to be literate around how they're getting a better result with these systems and also how they're managing the risk of these systems. So, there's a lot on leaders' plates right now, right? Because you need to inspire your people, you need to get results, but you also need to really humble yourself and say, you know what, I got to get a little more technical than I used to get.
And Diginomica wrote an article last week talking about enterprise focus on the last mile, not the first mile. And in the article, I think it was Stuart who wrote it, he talked about, control with access to data and metadata, deterministic execution. So you're moving less from probabilistic to more using existing processes that the enterprise has put into place because they had to in terms of executing deterministically across complex workflows, governance, people in the middle. Like the last mile had 5-6 components that Stuart wrote about that spoke to this is the enterprise maturity that the consumer side doesn't quite have. So they got the first mile, you got the language models spitting out. But in terms of a business, like a hospital or a bank or a manufacturer, that's a whole different ballgame.
I think I read that. That was the Jeffrey Moore thing, right? With the crossing the chasm. Something like that.
Is that what it was?
I think it was Jeffrey Moore talking about that. But let me change the subject real quick. We got a few minutes. 625 billion spent for AI among the Mag 7 pledged for next year, with Amazon saying, F you market, we're going 200 billion.
Right.
What does that mean to you? We're not in a bubble. We're doubling down, not into a bubble.
Guys, in 2 years, we're going to have data centers in space. We're going to have data centers in space.
Oh, yeah. The cooling's amazing, I hear.
Because that's the only way we're going to be able to provide the energy that AI needs. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, look, I get a little bit torn about this because, like, in enterprise folks like us, we know that a lot of times, like, the good numbers aren't sexy numbers, right? So when you look at like interesting AI use cases that all of us know from different vendors, it's things like save 57,000 hours in consulting by being able to deliver research faster, or I brought my time to value down. I looked at something recently on RFQs more efficiently. 1.6 million days of unanticipated time savings, whatever. You start documenting these results and you start to think, you know what, there's something here, right? Like this isn't just like a blockchain, crypto, metaverse, whatever. Like when you
don't be dunking on crypto. We're all bruised right now. Don't.
Yeah. But there's something underneath this that does have value.
Yeah, of course.
But Ray, as far as predicting like what the payoff comes from, you always get a little nervous when all the leading companies aren't making a profit, with the exception of the NVIDIAs or the hyperscalers that are essentially handing out the shovels for the gold rush, right? Those folks are making money. But when the leading frontier models and stuff like that and the data center build outs are being built on like borrowed money or massive investments, you wonder a little bit, because it does feel a little bit speculative. And one of the things I worry about with data center build outs, Ray, and we don't have time to talk about this today, but I have different theories of human intelligence. And I think that excessive data isn't the way to true intelligence necessarily. And so I think we need to get a little bit away from our big data obsessions. And a lot of enterprise vendors are actually doing really well with small fit for purpose models for specific tasks. And that was one thing.
Smaller models, more focused.
Exactly. And causal AI, for example, which looks at what the actual cause and effect relationships, relies on more modest causal graphs that are not incredibly data intensive. And there's a whole emerging field of active inference you can read about that was at Constellation the year before that also it's not agentic in an LLM context is agentic in a different way that's also built on small data. So I worry a little bit about huge data center build-outs in particular, but I do think that it'll be interesting to see which aspects are bubbly and which are reinforced by companies that are actually having success. And I think despite the PwC stuff, what you read about with the 10% is they're getting all the foundations right. They're getting their data and process foundations in place. And there is, success to be had there. So I just hope that more companies get savvy about this and figure out how to do this the right way. But we'll find out this year if they do or not, because right now there's still a lot of crazy shit happening. So I don't know, man.
John, finish the sentence for us. 2026 is the year of
AI contradictions.
I love it.
It's not scaling AI. It's AI contradictions.
Yeah.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, because we're going to see amazing stuff that blows our minds, but then we're going to find out that it's either not secure or not enterprise ready. We're going to see incredible enterprise projects that are successful, but we're also going to feel really displaced sometimes in our own lives with where we're headed. We're going to feel displaced by the market. We're going to check and see that all our stocks are down. We're going to wonder if SaaS companies can hold down and play the long game and not get freaked out by their valuations. It's going to be a year of contradictions, and I don't know where it's going to land, but what I would suggest to everyone is take a deep breath and refer back to the previous guest, Kyle, and his advice of kind of plot your course, and also pay attention to your team's course, as he pointed out, so that you're not the only person rowing in the right direction. You need both, but I think we're going to have quite a ride this year, and man, I hope we can make sense of it, because it's going to really push my ability to provide context.
First ballot Hall of Fame inductee to DisrupTV, Jon Reed.
Jon Reed, one and only. So
Vala, just real quick on a surprise for you. I asked myself after the last show, you always post about being kind and on LinkedIn and like the characteristics of really being a thoughtful person in this world. And I thought, well, I need to try to be a little kinder, because I looked at it and I was like, if our tech is so great, why is everyone so unhappy? And then I was like, in my day-to-day, maybe I can just have that mentality. So like these days when I travel, instead of worrying about my plane connections and my luggage, I worry about, is there someone around me that I could help? And it's really interesting because I've had some fascinating experiences as a result of that. And so my theory is we should all challenge ourselves to be just a little more kind right now, because the instruments of societal kindness are kind of fragmenting, and we need to fill the gap somehow. And I just wanted you to know you inspired me on that, and I took it to heart, and I'm trying to do it. So that's your anniversary surprise, and here's your applause. Congratulations.
I love that. I love that. I just
and
want to just
and here's to like 3,000 more shows. Congratulations.
Thank you so. That's a huge compliment. I just want to add to it. I would pick up my son a few years ago, and I would say, "How's school?" and he'd just give me bullshit answers. Really, nothing. It wouldn't lead to a conversation. So I just coincidentally one day I'm like, "Hey, who did you help at school today?" And he's like, this new kid was at school. He was eating alone at lunch. So me and my friends got up and we went and ate with him. We didn't really help him, but we felt good about he wasn't eating alone. And so I started asking him more frequently, who did you help? This person was struggling with math or, whatever. I held the door because the person twisted his ankle and they were have crutches. He started to develop helpfulness muscle. And he doesn't recognize it. But there are times where he'll come in and I won't ask the question and he'll share a story and it's about him helping someone. And I'm like, this is awesome. So anyway, the fact that you're looking at airports to be helpful and kind, that's everybody. Of everything we talked about in the hour on Disrupt, and we had 2 brilliant guests, that's the biggest takeaway. Be kind, be helpful.
I would agree it's a skill too, because what it is saying, despite all the shit I'm dealing with today, there's room in my cognitive awareness to also be looking out for other people. And I love that as a personal challenge. I'm not saying it's going to fix society and culture, but it gives me a sense of a little bit of meaning every day. And it puts my BS in check a little bit. So
I love that. Thank you. Thank you, John. You're the
Thanks,
best.
John. Take care.
Go Pats. Go Pats.
Jon Reed, the one and only co-founder, CEO, Diginomica, editor-in-chief too, I think. Talk to you later.
That's awesome. What better way to end a 10-year run with an episode where one of our guests tells us that it's important to be kind and it's a muscle you need to exercise. It's a kindness to me. It's something you need to go to the gym, put in the reps. And then if you do it for a long, sustained enough time, you actually notice things do get better. Your default face is happy. You hold doors a little bit open.
No RBFs.
Yeah, you tip a little bit more if you can. Like, whatever it may be. You don't interrupt people. Anyway, it's I think it's important.
Happy 10th anniversary.
Happy 10th anniversary. All right, let me just make sure I mention who's here next week, because that's what we do after 10 years of doing this show. Next week, Elizabeth Weingarten.
Look at that.
Author, journalist, and applied behavioral scientist. Rebecca Hines, PhD, founder of the Work Innovation Lab at Asana and the Work AI Institute at Glean, and author of Your Best Meeting Ever, 7 Principles for Designing Meetings That Get Things Done. I love that. Boy, could we all use better meetings. Well, if it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. Thank you for staying with us a little bit later than top of the hour. We'll see you next Friday, everyone. Cheers.
Hey, cheers, everybody. Have an amazing Friday, and we'll see you back here. So.